Okay, welcome back, everyone. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, this is Cranked and Ranked. We talk about bands' discographies and other sort of shit that's rock and metal related, and we rank shit. I'm not going to go too much into introductions because you're listening to part 2 of this particular episode. So go back and listen to part 1, and we'll do all our introductions. But really what we got to do this week is hop right back in, ranking the Mötley Crüe discography. Last week we got we only did 4 albums apiece. That's how much we talk. And you know what? I think some people out there, they love those long-winded podcasts. So we'll just roll with it. I think that's a good idea. So joining me as usual is Mr. Eddie Sparxx. Say hello, sir.
Bonjour.
He is not French. Nor am I. But yeah, let's jump right back into it. So we were taking our turns and we left off with number 5, and so I'm gonna throw it over to Eddie Sparxx here to get us rolling with number 5.
Okay, number 5. My number 5 is the self-titled Mötley Crüe 1994 album.
All right.
This is the only album with John Corabi. It has a distinctively grungier and heavier feel. The guitar tone is beef, pure chug. Yeah. I love it. I love that guitar tone. Bob Rock's production, as you say, just really hits it right in that perfect chug spot. The riffs on it are great. I love the production. It's virtually a different band, but in a good way. It's almost like a prototype of the modern hard rock sound of today. John Corabi's voice in particular is just as good, if not technically much better than Vince Neil's. But Vince does bring a certain character to the band which is undeniable. You hear Vince's voice and you will think Mötley Crüe. Whereas you hear John Corabi's voice, you think, God, that sounds fucking cool. Yeah. That kind of just real good rock voice. There is a band called Hardline who started out as kind of a glam hard rock thing that sounded a lot like the precursor to this, and their singer is a lot like John Corabi. If I remember it right, it's a while since I've listened to that album. It's called Double Eclipse, I think. It's by a band called Hardline.
I think I've heard it, yeah.
That's a little shout out there I thought I'd just do for a smaller, less successful glam band.
For the Hardline fans out there.
Anyway, the album is a bit long. That's an affliction that a lot of 90s albums suffer.
Yeah.
Due to the CD boom, you only got to look at Load and Reload for an example of like, how much music did you say we can fit on an album? 80 minutes. We'll do 2 loads of 80 minutes. But yeah, I'm just going to go right into the tracks, power to the music. Excellent grooving opening track. Uncle Jack channels early Alice in Chains and keeps the grunge vibes going strong, and the breakdown at the end is extremely hard not to get your head banging to. Like, you don't even realize it's happening. I don't even realize it's happening until the song is over, and then I go and take 2 paracetamol pills because I get a headache. But yeah, Hooligan's Holiday, as Stephen had mentioned previously, fucking amazing song.
Yeah.
To me, it's, again, bringing out some of that facelift era Alice in Chains vibe. And it really does, in parts, remind me of the song Sunshine, with a little bit of Stone Temple Pilots core thrown in there for good measure. But
sure.
that song in particular, really, I had to stop myself and think for a minute. Is this just not unreleased Alice in Chains with a different vocalist? Because there are points where it convinces you otherwise that it's a Mötley Crüe album. But Misunderstood, the ballady track coming in at number 4. It's the longest track on the record, coming in at nearly 7 minutes, but due to the grungy, sludgy vibes of this record, these longer tracks fit their length. And again, I can hear some extreme influence on this one in the vocals. Love Shine carries a similar vibe to its predecessor, but comes in as the shortest track on the record, which I thought was an interesting pairing, to have the longest one next to the shortest one and to kind of balance out the energy a little bit, because they're both quite acoustic in parts. Poison Apples is the first song on the album that sounds like anything reminiscent of 80s Crüe. It could have appeared on Girls or Feel Good with maybe a little more 80s production on it. It even has that like rock and roll piano riff, which was something that they had done in the past. Hammered, again, also feels more glam metal than, albeit a heavier version, but not quite as grunge as the first three tracks. Till Death Do Us Part. I really like this song. Track that is reminiscent of Dio era Black Sabbath songs like Heaven and Hell and Sign of the Southern Cross to me, with that real plodding feel, great use of dynamics. This album is 100% the most underrated album in their discography. I can confidently say, had this album not have been by Mötley Crüe and shit on because it was Mötley Crüe, it could have been huge. It could have been much bigger. It could have kind of spearheaded bringing hard rock back from that massive blow that grunge had dealt it. And kind of to echo that, the Welcome to the Numb, that song reminds me of the Lizard album by Saigon Kick. That early 90s psyched out groovy hard rock sound that's like, it's not glam, but it's not grunge or alt metal either. It kind of straddles this weird line between the two.
They fit Saigon Kick and like Extreme and bands like that. It was all very talented people making hard rock music, but it was almost like serious hard rock music with a harder edge.
I've heard Extreme referred to as the thinking man's glam. Like
okay, I could see that. Yeah.
And if you look into the lyrics and things, it is, like you say, like a much more serious version of this, sex, drugs, and rock and roll sound, but infused with, much more socially aware lyrics. And it's an interesting combo that the early 90s gave us, was that crossover between the glam and the grunge thing and that like alt metal thing going on as well. And that's why I'd say the period between 1987 and 1992 is probably my favorite 5 years in music.
I agree with you totally.
Solely based on so much interesting stuff going on. But that's a talk for another time. I am gonna go back into the Mötley Crüe 94 album. Smoke the Sky, it's a faster track, but still carrying over that grunge feel. Very chuggy, almost groove metal in parts. Dropping Like Flies straddles that line between 80s metal and grunge once again. A bit of Stone Temple Pilots in there, maybe, in the clean parts especially. Drift Away is the ballad of the album, and a pretty cool one, a pretty good one, considering it's 1994 at this point, and there was nothing more uncool in rock, because the grunge thing was deep into its thing at this point. I don't know, had Kurt passed away yet once this album came out, or was this just before?
I believe he had already passed away at that point.
It was quite early in the year, wasn't it? April?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah.
So I think this would have been after that.
Yeah, so like I say, I love glam and I love grunge, which is probably why I feel so conflicted in all areas of my life, because, those two hate each other. So, but anyway, like, Hypnotized is almost like a funk metal track. I like it a lot. Baby Kills, standard early 90s glam metal track, a little more stripped back and dirty, but still retaining that good time feel. Living in the Know finishes the album with possibly the closest track to their 80s work on this record. And overall, after that absolute wall of information I just hurled at the listener, overall, this record is an awesome, underrated record and deserves much more recognition, in my opinion.
Cool. I would agree with you on that.
Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
So moving on to my number 5. My number 5 is the 1985 album Theater of Pain.
Ooh.
This album has a lot wrong with it, but to me, it's within the classic era of Mötley Crüe. So there's an aura of enjoyability, if for lack of a better term, there for this album that keeps it, from being like way low on the list. But
yeah,
this is one where I can pick out songs specifically to point out why the album isn't very good. City Boy Blues is probably one of the worst album openers. It's like there's no energy to it. It is so whatever of a song. It sounds like the kind of song that should be mid or late album. Like it should, once you've already established an album, that's when you throw in a song like City Boy Blues. And then of course you got Smoking in the Boys Room, which I actually enjoy this version more than the original version. I think it's a very fun, well done song. It's a classic song at this point. But really my biggest gripe about this album is the production, which it's interesting because 3 albums in a row were produced by Tom Werman, and he only necessarily got one right. And so I don't know what happened, but the worst is Theater of Pain. The guitar is so weak all the way through this album. It sounds so. I have 2 theories. Either A, they recorded the guitar with the guitar turned down very low for whatever fucking reason, so there's no presence behind it or weight behind it, or they just turned down the distortion for whatever fucking weird reason. And so it really, unfortunately, highlights the fact that there are a lot of really lazy blues rock style riffs on here. The riffs are just not very good. The whole album just seems very full of recycled leftover material. And then you get Home Sweet Home. So it's almost like you have this motherfucker of a classic, well-written, amazing song in the middle of this sort of shit fest that didn't really go the way that they wanted it to go. Home Sweet Home is the saving grace of the album. It's arguably the beginning of the power ballad craze. Yeah. With that one. But it's such a great song. There's no arguing that for me. But then you get into other things like there's a song called Tonight We Need a Lover. And if you listen to the lyrics of that song, I'm 100% sure it's about a gangbang. Because even in the title, we don't need one lover for each of us. We all just need a lover.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of a scary song. But that also comes on board with all of the lazy lyrics on here. Like some of the lyrics are, like whoever wrote them, whether it was Nikki or Vince, they just wrote down something maybe right before they recorded it and said, this is fine. This will be fine. Let's just put an album out. But then we'll get to the most frustrating song on the album, Use It or Lose It, which the guitar... There's 2 guitars that were recorded, one with a shitload of distortion, one with no distortion at all, and they put the non-distortion one way louder. So the riff is, and there's no heaviness to the riff. And that has to be the fault of Tom Werman. It has to be his fault. I don't know if the dude was doing a lot of drugs with the band and he just wasn't paying attention, but... If somebody in the band made that decision to make the guitar weak as fuck on a fast song, I don't even know where to begin on how fucking awful it is. So, yes. So it's just, there's a lot of what the fuck kind of moments on this album. And overall, it is 90% forgettable. But because we're talking about these albums in 2020, the fact that it has that big old 80s vibe going on makes it kind of I don't know, like I don't know. I don't even know what to describe it as. It's just something that like I find it enjoyable. But if somebody came and said that album is fucking dog shit, I'd be like, I know it is. It really is. But I enjoy it for some weird reason. So
I think that album is more of a vibe album than it is a strength album. I think that one, you know, if you wanted to hear 80s Mötley Crüe, then, you know, by all means put on Theatre of Pain. It's not their most impressive work, but it does have that real mid 80s vibe. And I would say that the production on this, you know, had this album been produced like Girls, 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 it would have been a much better album, I feel.
I guess so, yeah.
Yeah, I really like the production on Girls, 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 and I'll get onto that later on, but I'm done. You move on to your number 5. You're pretty much on. I can't believe how well this is flowing, because up next, number 4, number 4 for me is Theatre of Pain.
Nice.
You know, the band were off their heads on drugs by this point. It's the lightest and poppiest album from their 80s work, you know, even down to their image. And I think what you said with maybe making, you know, the production a bit lighter was a subconscious effort to make the album coincide with the band's new image, because they'd gone from, like, it's an easy thing to miss, but when you think about it, like the first album, they were like poor street punks wearing, you know, what they had, you know, and it was a limited wardrobe. They still had like kind of outfits, but it was very just leather jacket and teased hair. Then you get to Shout at the Devil. Shout at the Devil is like full on satanic body armor. You know, it's almost like very medieval influenced. And then you get to Theatre of Pain. Theatre of Pain, they decided, hey, you know, pink? Pink is a cool color. Let's cover ourselves in pink and polka dots and stripes. Let's be super glam. And then after realizing that was panned by all of the metal fans, they went back to kind of the street look on the following 2 records with Girls, Girls, Girls and Dr. Feelgood. But I digress, going back to Theatre of Pain. Like you say, it's way more polished, perhaps overly polished, you know, to the point.
I don't know, because I would use the word polished to mean something that doesn't show its weird rough edges that weren't done very well. I think there's so much exposed, not produced well things on this album. But I mean, this is your take, so go ahead.
Perhaps polished isn't the word for it. Perhaps that they tried to clean up their image a little bit, and I think not to make themselves seem any less, you know, dangerous or rock and roll, but to make themselves perhaps a little more appealing to a wider audience. You know, if they're going out there dressing with like a lot more pink lipstick on and stuff, they might, you know, attract a bit more of a feminine kind of presence. I don't know what the real motivation behind that was, but it could have literally just been a side effect of the cocaine for all I know. But yeah, but it's the most, I was racking my brain for this. It's possibly got the most 80s looking album art in their catalog with its color palette.
But I actually like the album cover though.
I love the album cover of this album. I'm a big album art guy, and to be honest, like, you know, I think this is one of their stronger album covers because, you know, when you think about it, Too Fast for Love is just literally a close-up of Vince's crotch, which is, I think it's an homage to a Rolling Stones cover as well, isn't it?
Sticky Fingers, yeah.
That's the one, yeah. But even so, like, to have like something actually painted, something designed, I think is cooler than like a photo of them on Harleys looking cool. Yeah. And
it's almost like the album cover sets up that the album should be really great, and it doesn't live up to the album cover.
I've got a big thing with like album art. Like I will envision the album art in my head while listening to the album, and I do it completely subconsciously. And I have like kind of the colors of the album art and things in my head, and I'm trying to match them up a little bit. And like I'll be like, oh, a Slayer album. Slayer likes blood. Blood is red. This is blood. This is blood red. This is fucking sick. You know. And then I'll listen to this album and I'll think, wow. You know, Home Sweet Home sounds like a pink purple song. You know, it's very 80s in its vibe. You know, that could just be me with a deep-seated, you know, psychological issue. But on the flip side, it makes for interesting conversation. So, yeah, I think this album deserves a little bit more credit than I feel people give it personally. I feel like, you know, the song opens with City Boy Blues, which, like you say, is a strange way to open such a record, you know, because I will agree, it doesn't feel like an opening track. And, you know, the guitar sound is weaker than the two albums that bookend it. But I think this laid the groundwork for the sound that they would continue to develop here on in. Up until Dr. Feelgood, because that same kind of slide guitar that would become prominent in the leads of Girls, Girls, Girls album and the Dr. Feelgood album, that begins here. So I can appreciate kind of the groove elements to some of this stuff. You know, I never realized how groove oriented a lot of glam is.
Yeah.
But now it adds up. It does have that rock and roll kind of swagger to it.
There's a lot of blues elements in those bands.
Definitely. And that brings me to kind of a 12-bar blues kind of song with Smoking in the Boys' Room, which is a cover of Brownsville Station. But this song has a delightfully mid-80s Twisted Sister-esque high school video. Yeah. And it's definitely a classic Crüe track at this point. And I just loved, you know, MTV's really, you know, it's funny now, but back then it was like, we're making a statement. We don't want your parents to like us, you know. And all the stuff with like Dee Snider and the PMRC always makes me crease up laughing because, you know, you've got all of these old dudes in suits, you know, sat there, and in comes this dude with a huge perm and a denim vest, pulls out this eloquently written speech and utterly destroys like this generation trying to shut him up, and I just love that.
Yeah.
And I feel like, you know, this was around in like the mid 80s, so this album definitely has the mid 80s vibe. And while yes, it can feel a little bit coked out at times with its you know, both imagery and sound, you know, I think, you know, Louder Than Hell is groovy as hell. It has one of my favorite Mötley solos, and I can't tell you how many times I've tried to hit the high notes in this song.
Yeah,
especially when like a
that's definitely a standout from the album among all the other songs. Yeah,
yeah. Like Keep Your Eye on the Money is catchy, but so far in the album it feels the most generic so far. And yeah. I think that's what weighs this album down is that it doesn't have much that sets it apart from the rest of the glam coming out at the time, because the only thing setting it apart is that perhaps it's kind of weaker. And bearing in mind, I am being harsh, but I do love this album, but I can appreciate the things that are glaringly, you know, wrong with it compared to the rest of their 80s work.
Yeah.
Home Sweet Home is one of the most iconic songs. Also, like you said, a major force in creating the big power ballad boom of the mid to late 80s when, because when Mötley Crüe did it, it was like, okay, that worked for those guys, let's do it. And all of a sudden, I mean, I know there had been a couple of ballads up to that point, but Mötley Crüe are a strange one because I think to myself, I bring up Mötley Crüe nowadays, and people are much more, familiar with bands in like the mainstream. I don't know if it's the same in the US, but over here, Mötley Crüe doesn't really get talked about. It's always Bon Jovi, Guns N' Roses, Def Leppard, those kind of bands from the scene, and they tend to gloss over Mötley Crüe in the UK.
That's not the case here, such as that's why we got a movie made here. Because they are a band that if you talk about 80s metal, Mötley Crüe's usually one of the first names that you hear mentioned. So it's a very different thing over here.
Yeah, it's such a strange thing because like I remember bringing up Mötley Crüe with like someone who had lived in the 80s and was into bands like Bon Jovi and like Whitesnake, and I was like, excuse me, how have you not heard Mötley Crüe? And they were like, I don't know, they must have been like more of a US thing. But like it just dumbfounds me that I've never really known many people that know Mötley Crüe but know stuff like Bon Jovi, Whitesnake, Def Leppard and stuff like that.
Well, also a lot of those things, to me, like in 1985 when Theater of Pain came out, I think that kind of music was popular, but it wasn't like fucking massive. And I think it got massive when Slippery When Wet came out. I think once Bon Jovi kicked in, and then soon after that, you had Hysteria, you had the Whitesnake album where he revamped the band and made them all hair metal. So I think at that point, everything got way bigger. But by 85, I think even though they were a popular band, they weren't as massive as they would get.
And just cycling back to that, I didn't realize until like the last year how American my taste really is in bands and stuff, because I'm from the UK, and I suppose maybe it's just hearing the UK bands all the time. I'm a little bit desensitized to it now. There's only so many times I can hear Paranoid and Ace of Spades and The Trooper and that and
there is, you cannot hear The Trooper enough times.
Yeah, the Trooper is a stretch. I'll admit the Trooper is a stretch, but I feel like maybe it really is just a national thing at that point, because I know a lot of people that do recognize Mötley Crüe, but like Mötley Crüe is never the band that pops up in conversation when I bring up glam. In my own personal experience, it is like Mötley Crüe, are they a little bit like Bon Jovi? And I suppose if you look at like record sales and stuff, and looking at it through maybe a younger point of view, me being 22, obviously, I didn't grow up with Mötley Crüe, and Bon Jovi, Guns N' Roses got huge anyway, like mega star huge. You had Bon Jovi. Bon Jovi kind of stood the test of time throughout the 90s. They were one of the few that kind of managed to hold on. They did do a big rebrand, though, like you say. But, yeah, it's always been a weird thing for me with Mötley Crüe, because they didn't sell the most out of all these bands, but they are the band that kind of music journalists and stuff will say is the glam band. And I've often tried to put together a big four of glam, and I can never quite do it because there's so many contributing factors that I often end up feeling like outrank one another. And that really is a video I'm going to have to make, and it's going to be a long one because it's going to take a lot of work.
Yeah, I do think that Mötley Crüe, I might have the timeline a little bit screwed up, but I think that they were even before Rat. So I think that Mötley Crüe, when it comes to the music that we talk about, when we talk about hair metal and 80s hard rock and that sound, I feel like Mötley Crüe was the first. Like
Yeah.
there may have been other bands doing similar things, but they were the first to blow up and put out an album. And I might be wrong. I know bands like Kix and stuff had been going since like the 70s, but I do feel like Mötley Crüe, when it comes to being in the spotlight, they were the first. So I feel like that's probably why they're, especially over here, they're talked about more.
Yeah, I think that could be it, you know. And yeah, just to wrap up that tangent, I've it's just always dumbfounded me how over here Mötley Crüe kind of gets glossed over in my experience. But anyway, going back into the album tonight. You said it's I feel like this album kind of bellows out of the speakers like a mating call. Like this is the song that I would expect Mötley Crüe to follow up a ballad with. Like, okay, we've won the girl over, now let's get to the turn the cameras on, dudes, like kind of thing. You know?
Yeah. We've won the girl over.
Yeah. and I kind of tried getting into that kind of sex, drugs, and rock and roll mindset by turning around and saying, Home Sweet Home is like the story portion of the porno, and then this is, quote unquote, the good part that you skip to it in that kind of context. But I do think I do love Home Sweet Home, don't get me wrong. But I do love Tonight because it contains my favorite chord progression. I have affectionately dubbed the Maiden progression because it has that da 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 kind of thing in there at one point. I can't remember the speed of it, of course, but that's a Maiden progression to me. You know that like Dirty Diana by Michael Jackson uses it. There's a lot of 80s songs that use that songwriting technique, and I don't hear it anywhere in like modern music, whereas it used to be all over the place back in the 80s, and that's something I deeply miss and would like to see come back in the 2020s. Is that specific chord progression, because it's just so powerful, and it translates to all genres pretty much. I mean, I'd love to hear a jazz song with it. But yeah, anyway, Use It or Lose It is pretty much speed metal at that point, with its double kick drumming and intense riffing. Again, I know I've said this before, this song is like a car chase. It's something I'd break the speed limit to. I didn't notice at the time the clean guitar problem that you were talking about, but I'll have to go back. I'll have to go back and listen to it.
You won't be able to unhear it, so I feel like I ruined it for you.
That one. Yeah. And it's got, you say one's distorted and one's clean.
You can hear in the background a distorted guitar, but the one that's front and center is a clean electric guitar playing this riff that clearly wasn't made to be played clean, but it just sounds weird.
The first thing I'm going to do after we've done this podcast is look at that, and I'm going to ruin this album. But yeah, like the next song, Save Our Souls, brings back this slow groove that they began to utilize on this album, but it doesn't stand out to me at all. Like I'm debating whether or not this one is a skipper, to be honest. It doesn't quite jump out to me like the rest.
Yeah.
Raise Your Hands to Rock.
Oh, shit. I can't believe I didn't talk about that song.
Are you going to say the same thing as I did? Are you going to say the same thing?
Are we going to say I Want to Rock?
I was going to say Raise Your Hands to Rock is basically Feel Like Making Love by Bad Company.
But it's totally that. But also, if you think of I Want to Rock, dun, 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 this is Raise Your Hands to Rock, dun, dun, dun,
as well.
But also the title, Raise Your Hands to Rock. What the fuck does it mean?
Yeah.
It almost seems like in this day and age they went to a hard rock song name generator And it just came up with Raise Your Hands to Rock. All right, that's the name of this song. What does it mean? I don't fucking know. Just do it. It's got rock and roll words in it.
It's like those videos where people, have you seen these, where they'll put all of the lyrics to every song by a band ever into like a bot, and the bot will then be programmed to write the lyrics to that band's song.
I've seen that.
I love stuff like that. And
so that's what it seems like. The title is fucking weird, but I didn't mean to step on your thing. So you keep going.
Oh no, 100%. That was just a little point I wanted to make. But yeah, I completely forgot about Raise Your Hands to Rock until re-listening to this album. I feel bad that popular opinion kind of subconsciously led me away from this album until re-listening to it for this episode, because I do feel as though it has redeeming qualities 100%, and it does have that 80s Mötley aura that, you know, obviously you mentioned as well. And final track on it, Fight for Your Rights, is exactly what I'd imagine a good party sounding like. And this isn't even the Beastie Boys one, but like you said, it's almost like they took a bunch of 80s hard rock and metal buzzwords and just fucking put them on a dartboard, and whatever dart hits what word is the next song. And it does come off quite cookie cutter, this album. I would say that Fight for Your Rights is a good album closer. You know, 80s glam metal done right. It's uplifting, dark, but powerful, and generally great to just drink to. But all in all, this album is better than I remember it, and I'll be more likely to play it in the future than I would have been had I not given it a proper re-listen. But I do agree that the following albums I've put above it are leagues above it in terms of both songwriting and production. So yeah, that is...
Well, then let's move on to some of those albums. So,
hell yeah.
My number 4 is Girls, Girls, Girls from 1987. First off, also produced by Tom Werman. And this is another weird album because I feel it's very uneven, because it has songs that are so fucking good, like Wild Side. Wild Side is probably my favorite Mötley Crüe song.
It's such a good one.
It's just got so many cool parts. It's so well written. It's so energetic and fun. And then, you know, obviously Girls, 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 which is now like, you know, the basically millions of strippers have danced to. There's probably a stripper right now somewhere in the world dancing to that song as we're talking.
I'd be willing to put money on that.
So it does have like a classic quality to the album. And also, yeah, it is pretty clear that they steered a little bit more into the blues rock area and shed their glamness a little bit on this. It makes sense because clearly they saw the error of their ways with Theater of Pain, and they were trying to, I don't know, make something a little more organic and real rock and roll, even down to the album cover. It's all like, oh yeah, no, we're not those guys anymore. We now have motorcycles. But honestly, the album to me crashes really quickly because the songwriting is not that much better overall than Theater of Pain, and the production. It's almost like on some songs they put a whole lot of effort into making it sound really good, and then other ones they just did whatever the preset thing was. Okay, before we go crazy, these are just album filler songs, so let's not go crazy trying to make them sound amazing. So it sounds kind of all over the place, and to me it's just barely better than Theater of Pain, but just the album based on Wild Side alone, I don't know, that it carries a lot of weight for me. But a question that I often ask people when we talk about Girls, Girls, Girls is, what the fuck is Nona and why is it on this album? It is really unnecessary. It's literally nothing happens in the song. It doesn't feel like it fits in at all. It feels like I don't know if Nikki Sixx just had this song, this idea, and he just desperately wanted it on this album, and so it's weird. It's a weird speed bump in the album where it just kind of goes, "What is it?" and then the album continues again.
Yeah.
So, but unfortunately, the album doesn't really recover. It's just all these recycled bluesy rock riffs that could have been written by any number of bands doing music at the same time. And unfortunately, if you're really talking about what was going on with music around that time, my money's on Appetite for Destruction. Like, that album is literally a giant, Death Star, eclipsing this tiny little planet of girls, girls, girls. So it doesn't matter how much they really tried on this album. What was going on at that time, it makes the album feel like too little, too late. Like, nice try, guys. Maybe we'll hook up again next time.
Yeah.
But like I said, there are minor improvements over Theater of Pain, but it's still not an amazing album to me. And that's all I have to say.
Ooh. I might have a hot take on that later down the line.
All right.
Okay. So my number 3. Now here, it might be a controversial one to have it this low, knowing its icon status, but it got to the top 3. So yeah. It's still in the higher league of all of these albums, and I'm just gonna go out here and say it. This is probably the biggest leap in quality of all of their albums to me personally. Shout at the Devil.
Oh shit.
Major improvement on their previous album. Production is better. The band sounds better too. They sound more refined. They know what they're doing a lot more. And I'm just going to jump right into the track by track because this album is just banger central. But I felt the need to dissect it a little bit.
Okay.
So, in the beginning is your oh-so 80s post-apocalypse intro with... Nikki putting on a British accent for that added drama. Shout out to Britain on that one.
Doesn't it feel good to live in the country where when people want to sound very serious, they fake your accent?
I think the funny part is though, despite the fact that I have a pretty good speaking voice on stuff like this, if you were to enter my household with my family, we're from Cornwall, so we're Cornish. So we're in the proper southwest. I suppose it's probably one of the more rednecky parts of Britain. So if you were to come into the house, you'd be met with, "Right, Matt, how are you? Oh yeah. Oh, how are you, Matt? Oh, right on, Matt. Yeah. See, try translating that."
I just want to know what Matt means.
Matt is basically mate. But,
okay. I should have known that.
It's almost like a little bit of it's like the UK's answer to the kind of southern twang, where it's I suppose anywhere else in the UK it would be referred to as how a farmer would talk. I'm a farmer. But yeah, it's a very rural thing in Britain.
Okay.
I think the further back generation-wise you go, voice crack there a little bit, sorry, from doing all the other accents and trying to find my original voice again. But yeah, the wide variety of accents in Britain never ceases to amaze me, considering its size, But yeah, Nikki manages to put on a pretty decent... I actually had to look into who did the voice, only to find that Nikki had decided to talk like David Coverdale for a moment. Yeah, in the beginning. But yeah, I think it's a really cool way to open an album. And I suppose at that point in music, I don't think there was a lot of that going on. So for a young kid to find this band and to put this on for the first time, I mean, that must have been a goosebumps moment for some 80s kids to be like, what's coming next? this sounds tense.
It's very similar to an album that came out the same year. If you're talking about the number of the beast, like you hear, but they couldn't have ripped them off because it came out the same year. So,
but yeah, it's such a cool little convention that 80s music has. It has such a theatric element to it.
Yeah.
That this almost feels like it could be a concept album the way it starts. And then comes right in after that little intro to Shout at the Devil with the dun dun dun. Really already shows off a much better version of the band's sound in both production and songwriting. It's exciting, it's much thicker, it's more fleshed out, and it's hard not to get on board with the shout at the devil thing going on, raising your fist. That is like a call to arms of a song.
Agreed.
That is how to gather your fans.
That was a side note. That was actually my daughter's first favorite song when she was like 1 or 1.5.
That's so cool.
She would sing along to the shout in the back and then always ask me to play that song. So
that's awesome.
It even connects with the youngest of our generations.
I will say my uncle has I've got a cousin, and she was very young at this time, and my uncle was driving along with Whitesnake's Judgment Day, like cranked, and she was in the back, and he looked in the rearview mirror, and that riff, she's just in the back like this with like the full-on face and everything, and she's like yeah, pulling that kind of like
in podcast face. World, you couldn't see he was making the shit that damn that shit's good face with the frowny face. You know what I'm talking about.
But anyway, let's get into the first Mötley Crüe song I ever heard.
Oh, all right.
Looks That Kill. I was 11 and I had just gotten into metal through Guitar Hero 5. I love it just as much as I did back then, and I had a great time, singing along while trying to play the guitar on the game at the same time and trying to hit those high notes, and I just started puberty, so they were very all over the place. So, she's got looks that cool. So, but yeah, going into Bastard, one of their speedier tracks. I mean, this one goes hard. Love it.
Tidbit about that song. That's one of the songs that was on the PMRC's list of songs that needed to be banned.
Filthy 15, wasn't it? Yeah. What a playlist.
Yeah.
Surely there's a Filthy 15 playlist on Spotify. There has to be.
If not, somebody on YouTube, I'm sure, did it.
100%. Has to exist. And then after Bastard, you get God Bless the Children of the Beast. It's a cool little interlude which like breaks the album up a little bit. Only really works in context though. Like, I wouldn't seek this track out. No. It's an interlude. Much like Nona, which I will get on in a minute. I do know a bit of a tidbit of information on Nona. The cover of Helter Skelter is badass.
Yes.
Like, way to take the Beatles and metal up an already considerably heavy track, considering it's a Beatles song, and they added that minor third dun 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 to the riff, instead of just having that drony kind of thing that the Beatles did. But God, that's just such a cool version of that song. I love that one. Redhot is the double bass track of the record. Tommy Lee always needs to break out one, and I doubt the thrash guys would be able to fault this, other than it not being like 240 BPM. Like, I actually think that this is good speed metal at this point. That song,
yeah, pretty much.
I think they had the capability to be a speed metal band had the glam thing not taken them. You got songs like Livewire, You know, Mick Mars is downpicking all of those. You know, that's James Hetfield level stuff.
Yep.
You know. Now come to the second Mötley Crüe track I ever heard, and that was this is Eddie's story time. I heard this on the soundtrack to GTA Vice City, and 11-year-old me was having a whale of a time as it had come onto the in-game radio at the perfect time. And I can't remember the name of the mission, but it's the mission where you have to raid this gang house and you're shooting at the bad guys on the roof from a helicopter with a minigun. And that song had come on, and as the helicopter peeked over the horizon, the riff started, and it was almost like Fortunate Son in a Vietnam film. And I just felt so like 11-year-old me was in God mode at that point. And I have a massive nostalgic connection to this song. And I love like the Phrygian, like Eastern tones of the and then the like kind of Arabian kind of sounding solo with those cool Eastern melodies in there. I really love it. I love that song. And that's probably a dead giveaway for what my favorite Mötley track is. So, but yeah, Knock 'Em Dead Kid gets stuck in my head way too easily. It's such a catchy song. I've touched on this one already, but like this really does feel like a better version of Too Fast for Love. Like with not Knock 'Em Dead Kid. Too Fast for Love, 10 Seconds to Love. Sorry, yeah. I got that mixed up with my notes there, but I think they really did just listen to the previous album and think, hey, you know, that title was pretty catchy. Do you reckon we could change it slightly and make a different song and and milk it for all it's worth? And then finally we have the song Danger. Now, I love 80s chorused clean guitar, so that intro is a winner for me already. You know, Vince sounds really cool on this track too, and the album as a whole.
That's a great album closer too, I think.
Yeah, and the little bit of synth thrown in for like good measure gives it that extra cheese that I love and expect from 80s metal. And overall, this is an essential 80s metal record, you know. And, you know, I know the purists will turn around and say, oh, Mötley Crüe were a bunch of posers. Like, dude, this album, regardless of image, was just fucking great. You know?
And you said an important thing there. You just used the term metal on its own. And I would say for this particular album, that's what it is. It's just an 80s metal album. Like, it doesn't, the glam part's totally gone. It doesn't fit in with the hair metal stuff. It just feels like a really heavy early 80s metal album, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, it's heavier than shit that Judas Priest were doing. So, I mean, they're considered the metal gods. So it's like, yeah.
Yeah, like Judas Priest have had a wild career as well, because they have just flip-flopped between like all sorts of genres. But like, that's a discussion for another episode.
Yeah.
But they've definitely experimented in their time.
So you done with that?
I am done with Shout at the Devil.
Cool. So moving on to my number 3. So we're getting to the point here where we have now gone from albums where I could complain about things to 3 albums that I think are fucking amazing and are the reason why Mötley Crüe is a band that I still talk about today. The number 3 for me is the 81 debut Too Fast for Love. And these are ones where like I had a lot of notes written for other albums, but these last 3 albums, it's just like 4 or 5 bullet points, because I'm like I know these albums so well and I love them so much that it's all in my head. But you mentioned it before, but just the intro of Livewire is so good. Even today, sounds really fucking good. But I'm going to take this opportunity to start talking about something that I feel it's kind of weird that it's taken us an entire episode and a half to get to. Tommy Lee as a drummer.
Yeah.
the dude fucking kills. But not only that, from the get-go, from the first track on the first Mötley Crüe album, he has his own thing going. He does things on the drums that stick out, like especially on this album, the crash cymbal stops, the mutes that he does, and the
those.
random cowbell thrown in, and his weird starts and stops, and the fact that he lays on that fucking kick drum so hard, like there's such a stomp, and I don't know a lot of other drummers that were doing anything near what he was doing, the style that he was doing. Like, sure, there were more talented drummers or more diverse drummers, but I think that when it comes to carving out a niche of who you are as a unique drummer right away, there's not a lot that fit in the same camp as Tommy Lee as doing that right out of the gate. So, like, I play the drums to Livewire more than I play air guitar. Like, I'm more drumming along with Livewire. And then, so I'll just throw out songs that I love. I love Piece of Your Action. Piece of Your Action's a fucking great song. But we talked about that, how the riff is kind of like Rat, and I think that's probably what I like about it. But the thing that you complained about with the production values not quite being there yet, I do agree with you, but I think that's a character in the album that really makes me love it. I love the raw punky vibe, the lo-fi. It's almost like they had access to a fairly good studio, but they didn't have much time. And I don't know. It just sounds like a raw, hungry band making a statement and doing something in that year that I don't really think a lot of other bands were doing. I think this was a unique album when it came out. And it's just a fucking hell of a debut album. And that's really it. Like, I could point out, things that I like, because there's a lot of cool riffs. There's a lot of great odd drum beats here and there that are thrown in. And then Vince Neil, his voice does get better. And I do have a theory, because if you listen to the song Too Fast for Love, especially in the last chorus, it sounds almost chipmunky when he's singing. Like, it sounds like that. I have a theory that they were pressed for time. He either couldn't hit the notes or sang the whole thing out of key, and so they just pitched up. They increased the pitch on his vocals to make it fit. I don't know if that's true, but that's my theory, because otherwise, why would you make the vocals sound like that? It's very weird. But yeah, Too Fast for Love, a fucking classic debut album, and I still love it today. So there you go.
Yeah, and I think just cycling back to what you said about Tommy Lee, I've always noticed those cymbal chokes in particular, that are just really sporadic, and he does it on they're just so fast and clean, because he'll be playing like digga 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 digga, and that little it's just so, it really injects unique personality into his playing.
It makes something that could be just an average, regular mid-paced rock beat and makes it something way more interesting.
Yeah, and I think that really is. I think Tommy is an integral member to the band's sound. He's got a real swagger to him. But yeah. So that was your number 3.
On to your number 2, sir.
Okay, silver medal goes to Dr. Feelgood.
Whoa. Okay.
Dr. Feelgood is extremely high up, and it was extremely hard for me to pick between these two albums, because these two are my favorite Mötley records. But this one got beat out just a little bit. So I'm going to talk about this one.
I could have sworn this would be your number 1.
I was thinking it initially, and then I listened back, But anyway, here it is. Best produced album of their 80s work, thanks to Bob Rock. I will say it's definitely got the best production of the two of my favorite albums. It's got chunky tones. It's their most successful album, as far as I know. Is it? I think so.
I'm pretty sure,
yeah. Because it had quite a lot of singles come from it as well.
I think it had 5.
Yeah, like that's a big amount. That's Black Album level singles.
Yep.
You know,
Totally.
not so much sales, but you know the amount of exposure they gave to it.
Yeah.
I mean, this is post Rehab. It was dubbed the No Fucking Fun Tour. There was a lot of singles on it, and I'm just gonna go into my track by track, my trademark track by tracks. So it opens with the little intro, like shout with Terror in Tinseltown, which is possible callback, reminiscing, much like the bridge in Kickstart My Heart. You know, because in both the song he says, when we started this band, all we needed was a laugh. Years gone by, I'd say we kicked some ass. And in the video to it, it shows flashbacks of their older videos and stuff. And I always thought that was a cute little reminiscent thing that they did on that record.
Yeah.
But yeah, going into track 2, Dr. Feelgood, undisputed heavyweight banger. Every single Mötley Crüe fan loves this song. Like, you'd be hard pressed to find someone who doesn't want to be like dun 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 dun. He's the one that called Dr. Feelgood. I just, every time I'm in a pub or a bar, I just immediately seek out the jukebox and find Dr. Feelgood, pretty much just to test what their speakers are like.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just love that song so much.
It's also, I think it gets overlooked for how unique the riff is. Because like especially when it comes to Mötley Crüe riffs, but it's like, if you think about the riff, the dun 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 dun, like it's not something that comes naturally to somebody trying to write hard rock. It's got a weird dancey quality, funky quality to it, but still being really heavy with the palm muting. So it doesn't. I think it should get more credit for being a pretty unique riff, especially in Mötley Crüe.
I think it had a little bit of that, like, you know, funk metal influence. You know,
maybe. Yeah.
I think it definitely has that, you know, booty shaking thing going on. Totally. But yeah, going into track 3, Slice of Your Pie. You know, that's, you know, real subtle with its meaning.
We got to mention the guest vocals from Mr. Steven Tyler in that song too.
Is there really? I completely glossed over that.
The very beginning of the song, you hear a guy going, ah, ah. That's Steven Tyler, and he does harmonies on it too in certain parts.
Holy shit! I did not know that.
I'm always gonna bring him up because I love Aerosmith.
Throw in as much Aerosmith trivia as you like, because there are things that Steven Tyler has guested on, like on so many different albums.
Yeah.
Like Alice Cooper, he's guested on.
Yep.
I know that. But yeah, wow, I did not know that's him at the start.
Yep.
Holy shit. Rattlesnake Shake, you know, is Rattlesnake Shake. Now, this is the Rattlesnake,
because they didn't want to call it Jerk Me Off.
Yeah. The Rattlesnake Shake song. Now, this one makes me laugh because I can't think of any other song called Rattlesnake Shake aside from the other Rattlesnake Shake, which is by Skid Row, which came out the same year. Now, this is such a weird little coincidence, or maybe not. I don't know, like, how far apart these albums were released.
Yeah.
But I just thought it was. I remember seeing Rattlesnake Shake. I was like, wait, did Skid Row cover? Wait, what? They did two? They did two different songs of the same name in the same year? You know, that's something that's always played on my mind.
It's pretty weird. I wonder if it's... I'd like to think that they had some sort of bet. Like maybe they were friends with Skid Row and they were like, hey, I bet you can't write a song called Rattlesnake Shake. And they'd be like, I bet you can't. All right, we're going to do it. And then they both did it.
I'd be willing to put money on that. Same scene. But yeah, it's also got horns in it, which is a cool little addition. Now, I've noticed in the late 80s and early 90s, that there is this thing with putting horns in metal. Now, that could be an extension of the funk thing, you know. Maybe
it was across the board. Like it wasn't just in metal. like everyone started using horn sections in their songs around the mid to late 80s, it seems. Even fucking Tom Petty had like a horn section with him when he played live and on one of those tours.
I even think there's an Exodus song on Force of Habit that's got it in there.
Yeah.
Albeit I think it's a cover, but still, you know, horns on a thrash band's record. Wow.
I'm honestly not opposed to it at all.
I am 100% for more horns. More horns in metal.
Yeah.
Fuck yeah.
Especially saxophone solos. Let's do more of those.
Oh my God, do not get me started on sax solos,
Top
man.
10 saxophone solos.
Hell yeah. It would be really interesting to see a metal band that doesn't do any guitar solos and just uses a sax as a lead instrument, like has the riffs and stuff. That would be kind of cool. That would be kind of cool to see.
Yeah.
But yeah, Kickstart My Heart, racing anthem, absolute tune, and it reminisces their career so far in the bridge.
See, but that's a song that reminisces their career and does it without sounding forced, and at the same time delivering a killer song, which they totally didn't really do with Saints of Los Angeles, except for the song Saints of Los Angeles. But that's nowhere near a Kickstart My Heart.
That's the thing. Like, on this album, they were just effortlessly cranking out bangers, and I don't know what happened along the line that just made them lose touch with like that kind of.
But they wrote
that kind of spark.
According to credits, I don't know. I never know how much stock to put in album credits because I don't know if you can use songwriters to help you out that for a certain amount of money will allow you to not put their name on the song. I don't know how that works, but for this particular album, they're all written by the Mötley Crüe guys. So if that's true, then that's fucking great. So
perhaps, you know, with the whole Rehab thing, I'd imagine that had something to do with that.
They had more time to write songs.
Yeah. But yeah, Without You, the first ballad on the album, goes for the full-on lovey-dovey approach, which does feel a little bit out of place with their aesthetic, but I'll forgive it, you know, because to go from when I get high on speed to Without You in my life. But yeah, Same Old Situation. This is one of my favorite Mötley Crüe songs. Awesome song. It's got a real old-time rock and roll feel to it in parts, and this is just a really strong album for me. I love this album. Sticky Sweet. Now this here is one of many strip riff songs that they've done, but this to me is a real defining one because it's got that kind of groove to it. It has that exact type of thing that I would imagine if a movie shot a scene in a strip club, this is the kind of thing that it would have in the background.
Yeah.
And I'm not even ashamed to admit that I make that kind of analogy because this is fucking Mötley Crüe. They were known for that. So
Also, I've always kind of felt, just because not only is the song called Sticky Sweet, but there's a lyric that says the phrase sticky sweet in another song on this album. But there's a part of me that goes, did the phrase sticky sweet exist before Def Leppard wrote it in Pour Some Sugar on Me? Because it's almost like they heard that phrase and said, we should write a song called Sticky Sweet. And that's what Sticky Sweet sounds like to me. It sounds weird when you say that over and over again. but it almost seems like they had that title and then decided to write a song around it, because it's one of my least favorites on the album.
I will say, sticky sweet is a phrase that I hear exclusively in the glam scene and fucking nowhere else in any facet of life I've ever, like not even down to like sweets and candies themselves. Like, I think it really is just a sex analogy that glam really latched onto.
Yeah.
Anyway, going on to She Goes Down. Now this is another really subtle song. Not this little cheeky number about oral. It carries a similar vibe to the previous track, albeit it's a bit more upbeat in its tempo. But aside from that, it's still sex glam. That's the goal here.
Yeah.
Don't Go Away Mad is one of those half ballad, half rocker songs they've done. and it has a real late 80s feel that I feel many bands would replicate. It's not a track I listen to often though. Like it's despite its being a single, it to me still feels like a deep cut because it's so late in the album. And finally, topping it off is Time for Change, which always strikes me as kind of a bittersweet end to the 1980s. Like the last song of their classic studio album era, you know, excluding Primal Scream. The song Time for Change and its sentiment hits me as if to say, glam's days are numbered. I'd say the vibe of the 80s production lasted as late as 92 with albums like Adrenalized by Def Leppard, for example. But as a final legitimate 80s song, I could be completely off the mark here, but I interpret this song as a final goodbye to the 80s. I know that they tried to do kind of a We Are the World kind of approach with this one, as far as I'm aware lyrically. But
I think this is the only one that has a co-writing credit from somebody else.
Yeah. I just, this is one of the songs that I just took my own interpretation from it. And it's like, it's the last song of the 80s that they did. And the lyric is Time for Change, which, would happen in 91 specifically. Yeah. And
when you put it that way, I like the song actually a little bit better, because if that's how they wrote it, with that in mind, thinking that we're entering a new decade and things may not be the same as we grew up with or whatever, but I don't know, like that's a better way to look at it. I always looked at it as some sort of really weak attempt to write an anthem for whatever the fuck they were trying to write an anthem for. Like they were trying to make a Hey Jude moment or something where people would sing Time for Change.
Yeah.
And it doesn't work. It just seems real, I don't know, not very inspired to me.
Yeah, I think I just get tied to that little analogy that I make. So it adds like a little bit of a deeper meaning to it. This is I think English was one of the only subjects I was good at in school, so I can kind of infer hidden meanings, but that might not be what they meant at all, and I could just be reading way too deeply into it. But that's how I like to see that song.
I'm gonna go with your interpretation.
But yeah, this feels to me like how to write a great glam metal album. 101 from the songs to the production. I know it's got a few dips here and there, but it's a great album. I'd venture to guess very few albums are perfect, even the best ones, So, yeah.
So this is a time where you have helped segue into me, because my number 2 is also Dr. Feelgood.
Hey.
So I everything you said, I can't add too much to it. It's a fucking huge album. To me, it's a huge leap in songwriting from Theater and Girls, Girls, Girls. I think that there's so many more memorable songs on here. The performances are great. Bob Rock really brings out the heaviness and groove in the band, even in songs in songs that overall don't necessarily, I don't think they're amazing, like Slice of Your Pie. The groove created with the bass heavy riff and the drum beat, it just feels really good. Also, another side note about Slice of Your Pie, the ending of that song is an homage to I Want You, She's So Heavy by the Beatles, where they even say heavy in the end of the song. You hear them go, heavy.
No way.
Yeah. So it was supposed to be an homage to that, which that's another fucking great Beatles song.
I'll have to check it out.
But yeah, there's the whole, because it ends very differently than it begins. But obviously you got Dr. Feelgood, killer song, Kickstart My Heart. But Don't Go Away Mad, Just Go Away is actually probably my favorite song on the album.
Really?
There's something about it, and it has nothing to do necessarily with it being Mötley Crüe, because the song has been with me for so long that it's become a very different thing. I think it has that what you're trying to say. They were there. They may have been saying with Time for Change. I feel that with Don't Go Away Mad, Just Go Away. It feels like a song that's written in this sort of I feel relaxed in the idea that things aren't going to go the way we think they're going to go. And the album really brings forth this, it's a very sort of like easygoing, part of the song, very just like, this relationship's not going very well. We've lived different lives. You know what? No big deal. No big deal. But then you kick in with the end part of the song with the and it really has a moving on, like we're forging ahead and we're gonna kick some ass kind of vibe to it. And the juxtaposition of those two parts makes the song really powerful to me, but it really does feel like a goodbye to the 80s kind of thing. I don't know why that particular song does, but it just has that feeling to me. And so everything you said, I can't say much more. It is a killer album. Even the couple of weaker songs don't drag it down, because they're still better than the weak songs on the two previous albums for me. And it's a classic at this point, and I think it's one of those albums where it's not my number one, but I totally understand somebody saying it's the best Mötley Crüe album, because I'd be like, yeah, I can't really argue with you. It's all the elements are there. That's my number two. I can't add much to what you said. So let's skip on to our very conflicting number ones.
Okay, number one. My number one Mötley Crüe record is Girls, Girls, Girls.
All right, let's hear it.
Now I have a few reasons. My first reason probably being is it was my first Mötley Crüe album, so there's already like a connection to it on a nostalgia level. But I do feel as though that there is a level to it that it's the perfect party album. Like it's the album Theatre of Pain could have been. Like taking the previous album's sound and upping the ante in both songwriting and production. It's pretty much non-stop good time music, with the exception of the short Nona interlude and the final anti-love ballad of You're All I Need, which had a controversial video depicting a murder. And so let's just get right into it. Obviously, the 1-2 punch of Wild Side and Girls, Girls, Girls tells you that it's time to get the coke out. This is going to be fucking wild. This album, they really do set the tone for pretty much the rest of the album. And the reason I love this album so much is because of how consistent it is to the vibe. I don't think any other Mötley album is as consistent with a vibe as this one. I feel like this one was designed for a party, with the exception of a couple, but I'll get to that in a second.
Okay.
Dancing on Glass and Bad Boy Boogie also carry the same good time rock and roll feel of the record. All this album wants to do is have a good time. Now, Nona is kind of a short intermission telling you to switch to side B in a moment to continue the ride, but originally that was going to be a full-on ballad, and there's a full unreleased version of it. And it was actually a ballad I think Nicky wrote about his grandmother who had passed away recently. But I think things transpired that they decided, hey, I don't remember specifics, but they thought, hey, maybe this doesn't, fit the rest of the album. So I feel like of all of their 80s stuff, this is the most Generation Swine moment throughout their whole thing, because the Nona part is very out of left field. And I feel like they said to him, okay, we can put the song on the album as long as it's a 40-second mini track that doesn't go anywhere. Now, I don't know if that's how it went, that sounds kind of shitty. But at the same,
I feel like if it's what you're saying, I feel like they should have just put it at the very end.
yeah,
Like when you watch a movie and somebody in the movie dies, the movie ends and then they say "in loving memory of." I feel
Yeah.
like Nona should have been an "in loving memory of" part of the album, because right in the middle, it takes away from the album.
yeah. Like, I suppose on like the one hand, if you are switching sides on a record, I think Nona is the track changer. But that
I'll have to look. I have the vinyl of this, but I don't
Yeah.
remember. But yeah, I guess it makes more sense that way.
I suppose as well, just going on with the party vibe kind of thing. If someone really is spinning this thing at a party, this is almost like this thing really is almost like the cue to, hey, we're running out of song. Flip to the other side. It's just so there's no awkward silence. But yeah, 5 Years Dead picks up that party pace again. But I really want to unpack All in the Name of Rock, or All in the Name of, because it straddles the same kind of creepy line as Winger's 17. Like, it's a great party song, but the underage implications of the lyrics will make you very uncomfortable. Like,
Yeah.
I don't want this to be one of my favorite songs on the album, but it just rules musically. But like, especially when I'm driving and singing along to the lyric, like, you say illegal, I say legal's never been my thing. I just think, wow, that's a really creepy thing to say, especially since this is about a 15-year-old girl. Jesus, like,
It's weird how acceptable that was around that time to be into young girls.
yeah.
It's very weird.
Like, I remember playing Vice City, and on one of the radio DJs on the rock station turns around and says, hey, if you want to make it down to the rock show this weekend, we're looking for underage girls, or something like that. And it just made me laugh, because I just think, wow, yeah, that decade was kind of filthy.
Yeah.
But yeah, it just continuing on. Next up, another party song, Something for Nothing again. Rocking tunes, bro. You can't go wrong with this album, really, for a good time. But now, aside from the interlude, Nona, this is the only full-on ballad on the album, with You're All I Need. Now, it's got a dark edge to it. His video was even banned from MTV for depicting a murder scene where a man kills his girlfriend off-screen, but it was enough to get it banned. The song is essentially a gruesome take on a breakup song inspired by a dark time in Nikki Sixx's love life. And yeah, that one kind of throws the mood a little bit. It's a good song. Don't get me wrong, it's a good song, but lastly, after kind of a bummer, it's a great song, but it does disrupt the party flow. So this album closes out on an awesome live cover of Jailhouse Rock.
Can you say live with quotation marks?
Yeah, live.
Because do you not hear the crowd noise skipping and starting over and over again?
Yeah.
It literally goes shh, shh, shh. I'm like, all right, it's live. Okay.
Yeah, basically, that cover of Jailhouse Rock really wraps up the album exactly how it should. And that kind of thing going on at the end.
It's a fun closer, for sure.
Overall, I think of all of the albums, I feel like this one captured the fun side of Mötley Crüe the best, because pretty much like the whole album's vibe is wild rock and roll. Fucking let's just have a good time. But yeah, that is why Girls, Girls, Girls is my favorite Mötley album.
All right, so my number one is obviously Shout at the Devil from 1983. And really with this album, I don't really have anything new to say about it. I think all of the reasons why a lot of people love this album is the reason why I love it. It's a classic album. It's probably, and to me, it's the most unique Mötley Crüe album. It's the one where I think they made the biggest statement, and I don't know, it's the one, it sticks out to me from all of their other stuff, because I think even the albums where they nailed it, like your Dr. Feelgoods, I think there were other bands doing similar stuff in 1989.
Yeah.
And I think Shout at the Devil, it really doesn't sound like anything else from 1983. Like, there were other hard rock bands, but if you take like the first Rat album doesn't sound like Shout at the Devil, even though they're considered in the same family of bands. But obviously the title track of the album it's just fucking classic. Looks That Kill has so many amazing guitar riffs in it. That's like a guitar player song just to play some fun shit. You play Looks That Kill. Bastard's amazing. The Helter Skelter cover is amazing. It's sometimes it's kind of cool that you go first with these albums, because I'm like, yeah, we already talked about this. I can just sort of jump around here. Too Young to Fall in Love, which that may have been the very first Mötley Crüe song I ever heard. I don't really remember. I just remember seeing the video with all the kung fu stuff in it.
Yeah.
But it just is it's the least amount of filler they have on an album. It's really consistent. The production's really good. Produced by Tom Werner. What was his name? I don't really remember. But he's the same dude that did Theater of Pain and Girls, Girls, Girls. But for some reason, this just has this big ass kick drum sound, and it just sounds, even now, because obviously it's very dated, but I feel like it sounds better than a lot of other things that came out around that time. And I don't know, it's one of those things that I think if they had continued down the path of making music in this style, where they were more leaning into the metal side of things than on the glammy side of things, I think we may be talking about this band in a very different way. And maybe they wouldn't have ended up as popular as they became, but I feel like maybe they would have been more respected by your sort of average metalhead. But that point being made, if your average metalhead was going to listen to a Mötley Crüe album, I feel like Shout at the Devil would be that album.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just one of those ones that has classic status and absolutely deserves it. Even today, listening to this album, I still feel like it's just, they fucking nailed it with that one.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's my number one. I don't have a lot more to add to that, but Shout at the Devil right there at the top.
Awesome. I think I've got one little thing. Like you say, Shout at the Devil, Theater of Pain, and Girls, Girls, Girls. That's the same producer. What I find interesting is that Girls, Girls, Girls just sounds like a much better version of Theater of Pain, Mötley Crüe. Whereas, those two albums are very similar in the way they sound, albeit Girls, Girls, Girls is much clearer and much more in your face. But they definitely carry a similar kind of vibe. Whereas Shout at the Devil, I don't know whether or not it was this big, influx of higher end gear that the dude had managed to get a hold of, but Shout at the Devil has that slightly more lo-fi thing going on, and it is an older record, but it does have a significantly different sounding mix to the other two albums. Yeah.
Also, an interesting thing about the production that I don't know if this has anything to do with it, but there is one other album from that era that has a similar production style, and that is the Kiss album Creatures of the Night.
Yes.
It has a big ass kick drum. It sounds full and heavy, and it came out, I believe, the year before Shout at the Devil.
82.
So I don't know if they had some influence, and maybe the guys were like, "Hey, can we get a sound like Creatures of the Night?" Because So now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, oh yeah. So I guess they do. They are kind of related. Those two albums do kind of go together, in sonically anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah. So Tom Werman is the name of the producer. But and I don't know if he produced Creatures of the Night. I feel like I want to do like a really quick Google to see if he produced that album.
Do it.
Hold on, Wikipedia, Creatures of the Night, produced by Michael Jackson. Okay, Michael James Jackson produced that album with Paul and Gene, so never mind. It's just a similar aesthetic with the sound style, but yeah, I guess you're right. It is if you're talking about the same producer, the two following albums feel related, whereas Shout at the Devil does not feel related to those two albums at all. So really, if you wanted to make an argument, Shout at the Devil should be lower on my list because it doesn't sound as much like a Mötley album as we would end up hearing from them. But still my favorite anyway.
At the end of the day, the beautiful thing about music is, despite so many factors in it, it is pretty much all subjective, So it's like, and I think it's cool as well that our rankings are in the same ballpark, but higher and lower for different reasons, and that's why I love doing this, because it's
same here.
It's nice to have a fresh pair of ears to kind of let me know why the mix of Theater of Pain is trash.
Yeah, go listen to Use It or Lose It and be ruined forever.
I'm looking forward to it.
So I guess on that note, since this was another sort of longer one, let's wrap it up.
Right on.
Thanks everyone for joining us for part 2 of the Mötley Crüe Cranked and Ranked. If you're listening to this one first, that's weird. So you should go back and listen to the other one and forget this one altogether. No. So yeah, like I think I mentioned on the last episode, if you like kind of what we got bringing, apparently I've talked too much now.
We're spent.
If you like our perspectives, I have a YouTube channel under Old Head, and Eddie Sparxx has one under his name as well. Go look us up if you haven't. Obviously, if you're watching this on YouTube, thanks, and go watch our other videos. Go subscribe to Eddie Sparxx's channel. So that's all I got. Do you have any parting words for this episode?
Should I do my catchphrase again?
Hold on. Let's get to the very end. So your catchphrase can be the last thing everybody hears, because I think that's the way we need to end things.
Okay, cool.
Because it's such a brilliant catchphrase.
Oh, thank you.
So, all right. So once again, thanks for listening to Cranked and Ranked. We'll be back in a week or two with another band. But we'll probably try to vary it up even more. We did some grunge. We did some 80s metal. We'll probably try, maybe even get a little heavier. We'll see what happens. But either way, thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time. Catchphrase, sir.
Later, dude.